Everyone got quiet. It must be time to begin. Good morning, friends, and welcome. Thank you for coming, and I'll address the camera. Those of you joining us watching on YouTube later, welcome. We're glad that you're with us as well. We know at these events, 100 people will come, and then 2,000 watch it online, so that's a great thing, extending our reach. And it's my great privilege to bring to you my friend Julie Wood. Julie, thank you for coming and being with us. Julie wrote a book, and it was a book that some of you have read over the summer and others have as well. And just true confession, a lot of times somebody I know writes a book, and they know that I'm a big reader, so they give me the book, and they say, read this. I'm like, I have to, because they're my friend, right? But I have very low expectations. So Julie had a book, and I thought, oh, I've got to read. How to read the book, and it was a great book and eloquent. Did you ever think you'd be an author?
No, never.
We talked about holding the mic close.
Oh, I'm really bad at that. I'll try hard, but no, it's surprising to me as well.
So the book's great, Changing the Message, and it picks up on some language that did a lot of harm to people in the course of the history of United Methodism over about a 50-year period. So the cruelty is incompatible with Christian teaching. That makes good sense. So I'll narrate a little bit of I have a history with Julie that's cool. Julie, this is amazing. Her pastor is my daughter, Sarah. That's pretty cool. And she was a conference delegate and stayed at our house up at Lake Junaluska. And so Julie and I were talking, and lo and behold, I discovered that I had been her pastor back in the 1980s. Like, she's had two Howells as pastors. She upgraded over life. And we reconnected, and she reminded me of that I had been her pastor back in the 80s. And you knew Sarah when she was just a baby. Say something about that. I mean, that's kind of cool that you have that memory.
Well, it was really neat because I had been the preacher's daughter, and when I left to go to college, it's like, I don't have to go to church anymore. I can choose. And I didn't go for a while, and then I decided to go, that I wanted to go to church, which that was really a kind of a big step for me. But at the church, and I joined your church, Sarah was a baby, and I remember her on Lisa's hip, so that was just precious when I look at her up in the pulpit, and I think about that. She does such a beautiful job.
She's not grown much taller since then, but yeah. And so anyway, so we were reconnecting and catching up over, 30 years that we had not spoken. And I asked you about children, and you said you had a son named Ben. And I said, how old is Ben? I remember clearly your words. You said he would have been 30. So in a nanosecond, we went from chatty catching up to, all right, this is serious, deep, emotional territory that we're suddenly into. So Julie, tell us about Ben.
Ben was, it was just beautiful. He had these green eyes and long eyelashes, and he was just this handsome, funny, kind, gentle. He's all those things you hear, the gifts of the Spirit. And he was wise. As a young little boy, his first grade teacher said, this is a child with wisdom beyond his years. And he could see things and see through things, and he went the extra mile to be kind. But he did have some disabilities. He had a speech impairment as a young child. He had mild CP. He was picked on terribly during his young years. It was very hard as a parent because, as much as we want to, we can't remove those things. We try to help children learn, the other children try to help our child have strong coping mechanisms and build their self-esteem, but the world was very harsh for Ben. But he was an incredible human who always went the extra mile, and he always took up for the marginalized, and he carried the weight of the world in a way. Like he thought about, people who were being trafficked and how many deaths were occurring unnecessarily because of possibly bombs that may not have been warranted. He carried all this, and he studied the Bible. He was very wise, and he knew the historical context of different things happening and how history contributed to current events. He was brilliant and one of my best teachers.
And he was a church junkie, we might say.
He was. He went to preschool at our church, and he found church to be his safe place because, remember, things were abrasive at school. Adults tended to love him, and he was often cherished and validated, but by peers, he didn't quite fit into on the playground, there's girl activities and the boy activities, and he wasn't coordinated. So there kind of wasn't a place for him. So he ended up standing with the teachers a lot. But he loved church, and there he was a leader, and his self-esteem he grew, and he was one who would, when they went to youth events, he would be a leader, he would lead groups. He loved it, but very involved. Our whole family was very involved. But he loved church.
And then things changed at your church.
So we had a new youth leader come, and it started out going south really quick. And Ben did not present in a masculine way. He was just a perfect Ben. He was just right. But there was assumptions made, whether he knew where he was in life or not, but the youth director just picked at him. Even things like the fact Ben chose not to eat meat. He had this tender heart. He said, I don't want to eat God's animals. And we always supported him in that, but he didn't ever impose it on others. Like, everybody has to make their own choices. But he made fun of him. He said, what's wrong with you? Just degrading. And there was a little trouble. He always had to bring his own food to youth events, or somebody had to think about, well, what can Ben eat? And that was so annoying to this fella. But there was a lot of jabs in the area of sexuality. An example is they were getting ready to go have a picnic, and they were carrying items to the shelter, and Ben and a girl went to bring some items over, and one kid said, I thought a boy and girl couldn't walk off behind the building together. He said, oh, that's Ben Wood. I don't have to worry about a thing. Just little jabs. There was things about women in leadership roles, and it very different than the way my son had been raised and brought up. As a matter of fact, this youth leader didn't match our church. It was very different. But he imposed this very rigid, judgmental belief system on the youth group. And Ben would stand up and he'd say, I don't know about that. And he would give him back information. And, oh, was he loathed. So do you want me to go ahead to the big moment? So this had been building for about a year, this tension. I met with the youth leader multiple times. I would think we made progress, but then it just wouldn't get better. Met with the senior pastor. He felt like it was on both sides. Ben was being disrespectful. So he felt like, they both need to work on it. But the worst was right before a mission trip. And we were wondering if we should just get out of the youth group, possibly even leave the church. But we wanted to see this mission trip through. And it really mattered to Ben. He felt like that was the church. That was being the hands and feet. He believed in action, and he wanted to do that mission trip. And then I was pretty sure we were going to do something different afterwards. But they had one last gathering before, and it was midweek, which was unusual. But they had a lesson that would not have been condoned by the church. All the other leaders were asked to leave the room, and it was on homosexuality. It was a very judgmental and cruel, harsh. And knowing what he suspected about Ben, it was an attack. It was cruel. But during the lesson, Ben didn't know. He thought, let's just get this over with. But they were all in a circle. And as the lesson ended, the fella said, Ben, I know you're gay. We all know you're gay. Do you know? These are friends Ben had since they were in the nursery. Do you know? everybody say it, you all know we all know you're gay. And said, and you're going to hell. And he went to each child and said, tell him, all the way around the room. And Ben had to sit there. And he said, I don't know what I've done wrong. Matter of fact, he had never even had a relationship. He was a baby. He was 16. He had never had the opportunity to live his life. And so this fella, well, what happened next is Ben left. I was at home, and it was a summer day. He was also told, you're not worthy of being in this group, and you do not deserve to be on this mission trip. You're not worthy of going on the mission trip, and you do not deserve to be in this group. So with that, Ben finally left. I was at home doing normal things. My husband was mowing the yard, and I just caught Ben's car whip into the driveway in an odd way, and he came running up the front steps, which was also unusual. And I went and opened the door. I thought, something's wrong. And as he approached, I could see his whole body shaking, and his eyes, they hadn't spilled over yet, but they were just a pool of tears. But his mouth was contorted and like he was trying to talk, but trying not to cry. But he said, I've been yelled at for an hour. I said, honey, what's happened? He said, I don't belong to the youth group anymore. They don't want me. They kicked me out. And I said, you watch your sisters. And I hate that because he was in trauma, but I was going to the church. And my mama bear mode took over. But he was left with his sisters. I would have done that differently. But I got my husband off the lawnmower. I said, we got to go to the church now. I called the senior pastor. I said, you've got to meet us at the church. Something's happened. I called my best friend, Casey. I said, I need you. Meet me at the church. And they came. They all came. And so we go in, and the other parents are still outside the youth room. And at that point, the youth, they were all kind of debriefing and talking about Ben and why he couldn't be a part of the group. And some of them were upset. Some of the kids were crying because they were put in this abusive situation and used as pawns as well. And the other parents said, we said, what happened? Why was nobody in there to protect him? And they said, well, he asked us to leave. Now, this is why we have safe sanctuary policies. And folks, they just gave in to the peer pressure and left. And so Ben was all alone with children and one adult. So we got to the pastor's office. Senior pastor there, associate pastor, my friend was waiting in the hallway. They got this leader, and I said, what have you done? You've now hurt him deeply. And he said, being gay is an abomination, but he yelled it. And I said, God loves everyone. I said, what if God's teaching you about all of our differences, peeling back the layers of the onion, helping you grow? He said, I know everything I need to know. He would not budge. It was this confrontation that, like, I don't know that I've ever been in anything that intense, but he was totally blocked. He did not care, and he did not care how wounded or harmed we were. And the pastors were totally paralyzed. They did not know what to do. And they were dear, sweet, beautiful humans who were kind and soft. But, we had these contradictory messages in the Methodist Church. Well, what do you do? I mean, I believe anything that's not of love is not of God. But we had these words in the book of discipline that empowered this paralysis. Like, what do? The words are here, but I believe this. They just got stuck. They just didn't know what to do. So I don't think Ben ever really felt safe again. And remember, he was a very tender soul. Things really affected him. He felt all the pain. And he also, I think it was just as much for him to know how hurt we were. He hated that his parents had to go through this. He hated that we were betrayed by our church, that we were crushed, that our church did not stand up for our baby. And our baby who had been baptized who had been gone through, oh my goodness, third grade confirmation. And there was a promise to nurture him in faith. And yet he was stripped apart. He was just kind of crucified for being the way God made him. And so he hurt for us as well. We were broken for him, and then the betrayal. And then we went to the pastor, we went to the head of Pastor Parish. Nobody would do anything. They kept him on. He stayed. He was able, and things like his parents going through divorce, and they told the child, oh, it's a sin, not supporting the child at all. All this upset Ben. But there was this inaction that created a double whammy. So when it happened, that's horrible. But just think, what if someone had said, that was wrong? That should not be. What if earlier the United Methodist Church had taken some of that language away? There may not have been this confusion, but thank God now we're making baby steps. It was life-changing for all of us. And, Ben, I just don't think he ever felt safe to be him. There was, do y'all remember Amendment 1 in 2012? There was a lot of legislation being put in place in North Carolina that was very restrictive to the LGBTQ community. But do you all remember there was robocalls and conversations and debates? And that's when I got to know Green Street, because I was showing up for some of the protests. But there was some ugly words being just shouted and proclaimed, and I'm better, they're lower, we're not going to have that, no way, they're undesirables, let's just get them out of our sight. Well, see, we were all there receiving all those messages after this horrible attack. And so 1 year later, on the anniversary day of Amendment 1, it had not been overturned yet, and we were at a community event. And Ben, we were looking at kids walking around. He and I were standing. Bill took the girls to ride some rides. And we were just noticing all these little family units moving around together. And in particular, I remember a young man with a child on his shoulders and his wife beside him pushing a carriage. And Ben said, I'll never be accepted here. I said, honey, what do you mean? I said, most people are good and kind and loving. He said, you live in a bubble. It's the kind of work you do, the people you hang around, you don't know. I said, oh, sweetheart, I promise you, most people are more good than not. We're all learning. But I didn't know it was just slowly, his life was slowly dissipating, just like a cup being taken out at a time. In each event, even some of the conversations at annual conference or on the news, it all is traumatizing, and you hear the word insidious harm. Well, it's where you just keep on having re-injury. And who would want to live in a world like that, where you can't be, where you just can't be you? And when you're a strong believer in God, the Creator, who made no mistakes and who created all this amazing diversity to enjoy, but you're just not good enough. Grace is for people other than you. I mean, it's hard to think, how could you find the courage? But he did. He chose not to keep trying.
I know this breaks your heart every time you retell this story. So we're grateful to be with you and hearing it and loving you and sharing it. You lost Ben. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You wrote in your book, my family now belongs to the deep, deep, lost-connected people who lived across all history, lands and cultures of the world, who have been spiritually scooped up from a life of the familiar and abruptly dropped into an existence of unfamiliar lostness. Yeah. So losing Ben, let's talk a little bit about advocacy. At some point, you burrowed out of your grief and you join others of us who for a long time have been advocates for change. I mean, what you were describing, I've thought about this so many times. I've stood in so many spaces in the United Methodist Church. I didn't think this was my calling, but somehow it became my calling. And for decades, I would be in these, it's just shameful even to talk about, debates. And I would always say to people, like, you think this is an issue. This is not an issue. This is people. These are families. These are hearts that you're breaking. And it's the tone so often. I've sat in rooms and people say, they start describing, they do this abomination thing. And you've said this, their jaw is always clenched. And I've always wanted to say that when I have done work in advocacy, it's not just for somebody who's gay. It's for all of us. All of us are cursed and wounded when that goes on anywhere in the world, and when it goes on in the church. Good God Almighty. Anger and rage and judgment in the church is it's so profoundly damaging to all of us. Talk about advocacy. I was thinking about, we did a podcast, you talked about the impact of this on your two daughters and on your husband and on you. Talk about that, just becoming an advocate. What's that like from the inside?
Well, I've always I'm a social worker. And I've always seen the beauty in people, and I've always delighted in diversity. I think it's like a bouquet of flowers. So I was kind of wired that way. And I was taught that way. You know, I was thinking, what is the golden rule? Jesus loves the little children, all the children of the world. When we really hold that in our heart, how can we think different? And I remember my dad demonstrated action. You know, I was born in the 60s, but, you know, there was such racial tensions like when I was in high school. But my dad made sure to buy his gas for the car at a black-owned gas station because he wanted to model that we're all the same. And so I had an advantage. I didn't have to struggle with, well, to be acceptable in God's eyes, I have to be a little better than another person. Let me just put that one down here so I can go higher up on the totem pole. But when you think about we can other anybody. It is all of us. And when we dish out something, it's really a reflection, I believe, of something on our inside, something unhealed, something harmed, something that's been belittled, that, you know, maybe we feel a little more complete if we can put another down. It's not healthy, but I think it's what we tend to do. But after Ben died, I'll start with Bill. Bill actually was catatonic. He was a nursing home administrator. He'd been an administrator for 30 years. He could no longer do his job, and he could no longer even eat or walk. He walked into traffic. We had to assign somebody to be with him, and the psychiatrist said sometimes people kind of short circuit with trauma, and that happened. He is no longer able to do the work he had done for 30 years. So the ripple effect goes on and on, on and on when harmful things are done. But Lacey and Sophie were 10 and 12 when he died, and, you know, they're afraid of the church. Like, you know, why do you go? It's risky. What if somebody turns on you? What if somebody judges you? But they have, they're advocates too, and I've been quite proud. In college, there was a child being bullied, and Lacey, who's a little bit timid and shy, she went and reported it and walked with that person to tell her story. And there were slangs being thrown at her. I thought, look at that girl go. They are getting the message. And then Sophie called me. She said, Mom, there's a kid who's gay who's coming. She works at a barn at night, and she has a horse. She says, family just doesn't want him around. They just keep dumping him off at the barn. And She said, I'm working with him every day, Mom. I'm here with him. I'm telling him how great he is, Mom. And I thought, thank you, God. If we can take these horrible things and do something good with it, then we change the world. So for me, the only way I can cope, if Ben had to suffer and die the way he did, is how do we use this for good? You know, the disciples asked, how do we know if something's of God or not? Look at the fruit. Well, how do we make good fruit out of bad fruit? This is ugly fruit. This is cancerous fruit. I've got a young man in my life that I've kind of adopted as an adult, but his family totally put him out. And he's this beautiful, wonderful human being, and he's been such a blessing in my life. And the girls and Bill, he's part of the family. But, you know, good can come from bad fruit. But just think of the cancer of a family, it throws away a child. But then when we challenge people's belief system, what if they've not been ready to look at their own? You know, we talk about the stones that we threw, the stones that have been thrown at us. We have to look at all of them and heal from them. We've all made mistakes, but will we face them and learn from them? It takes courage to do that, to say, wow, I really messed up on that. How do I learn from this? How do I grow from this? And what if I got a wrong message in childhood that I need to kind of deconstruct and reconstruct into a healthy, loving message? Because we've all soaked in messages our whole life. So the advocacy for me is part of my coping. It's part of how I cope with this. And every time there's an effort, anything we do, I think if there's one person, it doesn't have to just be that one, but maybe they go to the next person who needs a shoulder or needs somebody to say, you are okay with me. You are a beautiful, beloved creation. And there is nothing wrong with you. You be your authentic self, and we'll celebrate you. Ha! That's when good comes from something ugly. I'll never stop missing Ben, ever. But I've learned so much from him during life and during this next chapter. And I do feel like we are together in these efforts. He's with me. We do it together. And I do believe that good will come if we all just keep on examining ourselves and what's so deeply rooted that we may not even know that needs to bubble up and be discovered with truth. Just real honesty. None of us are supposed to be perfect. We're supposed to learn and grow.
You said something that I always want to comment on. Sometimes in church life, I used to hear this as a pastor, I still do some days. People say, the mission people in the church, like that's some subset of the church. And I say, that would be the church, or the mission people in the church. So sometimes we hear this thing, this needs to be named. You said, I'm the kind of person, because I'm a social worker, because I was taught to have a soft heart. Let's just be clear, Christians are the kind of people who have compassion, who love. That's the measure. I've been dinged, I don't mind being dinged at all. I've been dinged lately on 2 sermons. I preached one that some of you took note of, about empathy. And it went sort of viral, and I was just saying, empathy's not, you can politicize this if you want, but empathy, that's a Christian thing. We see who is hurting, who is being wounded by whatever is going on, and we stand with them. We advocate for them. We do all we can for them. And people in our society have kind of decided, they're the empathy people, but then they're the other people. And actually the other people think they're winning the day, and they think they're even winning the day in the church. But friends, just empathy, it's a Christian thing. Having your heart, having a social worker heart, tenderness, that's what it means to be Christian. Sorry, it's not optional. It's not something we sign on to or don't. Since Julie and I did our podcast, it was wonderful. The United Methodist Church, I was going to say the United Methodist Church changed, right? So before that, we had this harmful language that said homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching, and we do not condone the practice. Such dumb language. like it's a practice, the practice of homosexuality. Stupid language. We got that changed here in Charlotte at our last general conference. And there was a great celebration. Everybody was hugging everybody. I think Julie and I were the only two people who had a little bit of a negative reaction. Hers was like, why did this have to take so long? And mine was, this isn't over, right? There's still hearts and minds and attitudes and harmful gestures and words out there. So we still have a lot of work to do. Julie, something that moves me about you in our podcast, I think I want to reiterate this. I think this is important. In our podcast, I mentioned becoming friends with a guy named Craig Hella-Johnson, who may be America's greatest composer. He did a couple of pieces for us here at our church. And he's the composer of Considering Matthew Shepard, which is something that I would commend to you. We're going to try to bring that to our church here one of these days. And it's about the story of Matthew Shepard, who was this young man who was brutally killed in Wyoming for being gay. And so Craig wrote this great piece of music about it, and I'm just read a couple of lines and ask you to be you again. So he was talking about Matthew Shepard. He's an ordinary boy. He's a boy who loves music and helping and smiling and pasta. And then the parents are thinking about the people who killed him, and they sing these words, "When I think of you, and honestly, I don't like to think about you, but sometimes I do. I'm angry and confused. Late one night, I had a glimpse of something. I don't even like to say this out loud. It isn't even all that true, but I wondered for a moment, am I like you in any way? I pray the answer is no. I bet you once had hopes and dreams too. Some things we love get lost along the way. That's just like me. I'm like you. I get confused. I'm afraid. I've been reckless, unthinking, intoxicated. I've come unhinged, made mistakes and hurt people very much. I am like you, and this troubles me." We remembered together last night in my living room. I was at one of the general conferences where I'd made a speech. We're trying to pass some legislation, and a guy that I've known all my life, he attended my wedding, stood up and was making one of these speeches, just ferocious. And I was sitting next to a guy that I've known for a long time. He's one of the mystery people to me. Like the Methodist Church has said vicious things about people who are gay, and they stayed in the church. Like, to me, that's been like the miracle. Like, why'd you stay in the church? I'm sitting next to him, and this guy's uttering this vicious speech. And he leaned over to me and he said, "I love that man." I'm like, I wanted to get a gun and murder that man. And Mark said, "I loved that man. I feel so sad for him because he's knotted up with all this anger and judgment in his heart that he doesn't understand, and it's just consuming him. I wish I could help him." And so I was just so moved by that. And Julie, you've got the same kind of heart. Talk about that.
Well, there's been plenty of times where I feel anger and judgment. But really, when it comes down to it, we all have our areas of blindness. And, we're all a product. We don't know what, when I think of who do I have the most difficulty with, well, there's some more recent ones, but...
They keep coming up.
Yeah, I guess I have to keep working on it. But when I think of this youth director, I think about what pain created that. Something horrible had to happen to him to be able to take a child and brutally attack him the way he did. There has to be so much unresolved grief and trauma for someone to have the capacity. Because how do you do that unless you're so wounded yourself? I mean, how would you do it? Put them in a circle and publicly just rip him apart? And so I do feel sorry for him. He has to live with that every day. And, he's a soul. He's God's child, too. So, truly, I have been working on some things recently where there's actions that I get very upset about. And I wonder, where are we going as a people? And I keep thinking, remember, everyone is a soul on a journey. But what do we do with this moment? What do we do? Where are the seeds we can plant? What are the small steps? We might not be able to change big things, but a lot of little things do change big things. So what steps can we take that make the world more loving? And again, I believe anything not motivated by love is not of God. I just don't believe it. I mean, we have to be practical, but I'm the executive director of a nonprofit. Well, there's a lot of hard things I do, but it's in love. Sometimes I terminate somebody in love for the people I support and for them. Sometimes I make hard decisions, but I really try to ground myself in our core values. Do I have integrity? Am I showing compassion and best practice? Well, heck, for the church, what about love as a guide? And then in how we see the world and interact in the world. But we all have our weaknesses. We all have areas to continue to strive to grow. But the resistance of fear is feeding what we don't want to be, and to try to not hate. I've started dipping into some hateful thoughts, like how could this or that? What in the world? I don't want to be a part of that. I don't want that happening in, my world. And what can we do? But if we start hating, we're just like what we're fighting. If we're truly grounded in love, we have to stay in love. But we don't have to accept things we don't think are right. And we stand up and we stand strong and we have courage and find our voices. But we can't be passive, but we have to realize everyone is a soul who's on a journey. And I don't think God gives up on anybody, even the ones that I might want to label with a lot of words. And I'm really working on it right now, so that it never ends. We have to keep working, keep peeling back the layers of the onion. We all have it. We all have to figure out where our weak spots are. But I know that external power is not the way to solve problems. It's internal, and it's through our spiritual growth and closeness to God. That I know.
You wrote in your book about that youth minister. I do not believe the youth leader arrived on the scene alone. And then you add that what he exhibited is a reflection of fear from threatened egos passed through generations. Well, you just have to ponder that. That's really amazing. I was in Nashville a couple weeks ago, and I was sitting at dinner with a woman who's editing a couple of books that I have come out over the next couple of years. I said, have you ever written a book? She wrote a book once and then decided to be an editor instead of a writer. And her book is called The Limits of Forgiveness. I won't go into it too far, but she talks about sometimes there's this expectation that you just have to forgive, and there should be limits to that. For instance, you have a woman who's being abused by her husband, and the church says, you just have to forgive him, right? That's damaging. That's cruelty, right? But there's another kind of forgiveness that doesn't say what you did was okay, but I can understand what's at the heart of it and hope for healing. So I think that's what you're doing here. You understood that in some ways the youth minister was a victim of things he could not begin to understand himself. You have compassion on him, but never would we say that what he did was acceptable for a nanosecond.
We can have compassion and still hold a line. Like, I have to tell you about something that just happened a few months ago that I thought this is important. So it's been 12 years since Ben died. It took 7 years for me to have the courage. I was so afraid of hurting someone or causing trauma by telling his story. I didn't want to create any kind of harm, but I couldn't not tell his story. But it has been 12 years. And a new pastor moved in June to the church where this all occurred. And, I can't even go in there because there's that youth room, there's the steps to the youth room, there's a pastor's study. It's just now a place of trauma. But he somehow stumbled on the story, and he said the pastor leaving handed him this book, said, you need to know what happened here. And he wrote me this beautiful letter. He said, this was abuse, it was wrong, it should have never happened, and I'm so very sorry. Do you know if that had happened 12 years earlier, I might have my baby. If somebody had said, I'm sorry, that was abuse, that was wrong, but we had to live with nobody agreeing it was wrong because they didn't know what to do. So never should we allow that to be just okay and we just turn our head. And he's just an example of one of a gazillion scenarios, and not just related to sexuality, but think about skin color, or maybe you have an intellectual disability, or you're on the spectrum. No one should be demeaned for being who they are. And it takes courage. It really does. And I've had quite a few times, do you remember the healthy conversations? Whew. So during all that about United versus Global, and there was so many that I sat at the table, but every time I got so upset, people would show me compassion. I'd think, I got to tell you what happened. And almost every time, someone in the group would say, oh, that happened at my church. Oh, I know, that happened to a kid. It was 2 churches ago. But they would be kind to me and say, I'm so sorry that happened. Then I said, well, what are we going to do? What steps are we're not doing anything different. That's the way, that's what we're going to do. We're not going to condone homosexuality. Mm-mm. So they were just completely closed. But it did take a certain amount of courage because I found out I have PTSD, so I'd start shaking, and you'd try to take communion, and I couldn't even hold anything. But the thing is, we have to keep showing up because just look, there's a seed planted every time. And it may not be that day, but it may be that the next encounter that person had, they might be a little more compassionate. Or they might say, you know what, putting a kid in a circle is not okay. Or, whatever other degrading, dehumanizing act that may happen, they might stand in the gap and say, oh, let's not do that. Or interrupt abuse. You can just hear something that you might be in a store, but to interrupt and divert abuse, we can all do that. Just create a distraction or, something, but sometimes it's only up to us. We're the only one. There may be no one else to speak for that little 5-year-old or whatever the situation may be.
Of the many things that break God's heart, none must be as shattering for God as when it's God's church, right, that inflicts so much harm. Tell us about your dreams.
Oh, I've had some beautiful dreams. And I've had quite a few, but one of my favorite, and my mind just went pop, pop, pop with a whole bunch of them. But one of them I was holding Ben as a little baby, and I was just holding him, and I could feel him. I could feel his hair and his hair. I'm just stroking his hair, and soon he was grown up, and I had my arms around him, and I was still rubbing his hair, and I said, "You're here. You came to see me." And I was so happy, and I thought, I woke up remembering every nanosecond of it and was so happy. And I thought, I got to see him in his whole life. And actually, it was in reverse. I was holding him, and then he went small. And I thought, I saw him in his whole life. We got to be together. And I've had, I don't know, 5 or 6 of those. They don't happen all the time. But one time we were together, and he said, I just wanted to show you. And it was this valley with these huge flowers. They were like lilies, bright yellow and pink, and the greens of the forest was so brilliant, and the river was so blue, but we were somehow up. He said, I just want you to see how beautiful. That was a dream. I woke up so happy. He said, look at this. I've earned this, but it was he said, it was a necklace, and it had a gold stone and these little stones all around. I don't know what that meant. He said, I just wanted you to see, Mom. I don't know, but I do know I wake up feeling like I was with my son. And I think they're gifts from God. We can't know everything. We don't know what's what, but they're very healing and holding. They're very holding to me. I cherish them.
That's beautiful, grateful for those. Friends, let me ask you, and let me say no speeches, but do you have a question you'd like to ask of Julie? Danny.
He was 21 when he died. Yeah. But this happened when he was 16. But he did go to college. I thought, oh, he's going to soar above it all. But it just never quite left. Made it to 21. He made it to 21 as his last day, the end of his junior year, May 8th.
When?
I don't know. I will admit.
He's in the lowest pit of hell. No. Sorry.
I'm afraid I've
She
stopped.
asked, where's the youth minister now?
He's gone through several more churches and actually works with youth. I have stopped, and I just pray.
Eric.
As I was saying, Julie, mine isn't really a question. It's more of a thank you for your courage. As a gay man who has always loved the church, wanted to be part of the church, growing up in Texas, it's been slightly more conservative than it is here at times. You don't always get a welcome mat. And to be able to say what you've said and share deeply personal stories, to be able to talk about a child you brought into the world and had to say goodbye much too soon. Just the courage that takes, and you just realize you're changing one heart at a time. And I had a short time in ministry, and that's what it was. It was changing one heart at a time, and that's how it happens. So thank you for your courage.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing.
Andy.
I was curious, Julie, what biblical passages give you comfort and hope to counteract the clobber passages that are so hard to hear?
Well,
Yes, what Bible passages give you comfort and hope versus the toxic, damaging things?
Well, of course, there's, blessed are those who agree, but also those who are persecuted in my name's sake. I felt like that at times. Like God is love. God's not about ranking people and deciding, we as humans deciding who's worthy. And sometimes that's, to me, speaking up for God and God's design. And I've certainly been met with a clenched jaw and narrow eyes at times. And then, so that has helped in those times. And oh, I love you are beautifully designed and woven together in your mother's womb. My goodness, how beautiful is that? Everyone is of value. So that's a precious. And then, of course, the golden rule. When you think of what Jesus really was here to teach us and to do away with some of the law, the legalism, and what he said about the Pharisees, we kind of really gotten off track. And now I hope that we're, we just got to keep challenging ourselves to to be closer to God and what Jesus came to teach us. We just miss the mark. So it's always, what do we do with it once we know? Maya Angelou, when you know better, do better. I love her. I also love that when people would come to her house and make fun of someone or some sort of joke that was hurtful, she'd say, here's your coat, here's your hat, not in my home. I think our churches need to be that way. Not here. This is a safe space, a place for people to feel at home and comfort and love. It should never be a place of targeted bullying, power, misuse of power. And that's really what it comes down to sometimes is sometimes borrowing God for ugly messages. God didn't have that message. What do we humans do to find power? If we don't feel we have power ourselves, let's just attach God to our belief system and see if we can, be in control a little bit. We humans are complicated.
Bill.
You said Dan went to college. Did he move away from home?
Mm-hmm.
And were the college friends the same as the church friends in terms of the resistance? Or was he more welcomed at college?
He went to UNC Asheville. I thought, this is perfect. He had the most wonderful friends, and most of his friends have always been girls. He's always had a lot of female friends, and there's a few guys, but they were just beautiful friends. So some takeaways, we keep learning, and one of them is, I think it's good for parents to get to know the friends. What if the friends had my phone number? They didn't. How nice it would have been if they'd say, we're starting to see some changes in Ben. We need you to know. I would have gone running. Or there's this FERPA law that the college can't contact parents. Did y'all know that? He had stopped going to class in January, died in May. He was sitting in his dorm room. He would fake it and go out and have supper with his friends. And he would see them mostly in the evenings, but they had no idea they all were in different classes. He came home for spring break, and we had the most wonderful, did all of our favorite things. It was, Bill calls it a Norman Rockwell week. It was perfect. We made all the family favorite meals. We went out to eat. He and I went to the movies. I remember reaching over. I always do this. It drives them crazy, all the kids. But when I'm with them, I'm just sort of like, I'm so grateful you're here, but I'll tap their legs. Sometimes I want to hold their hand. They're like pushing me away. But I am a little bit sappy. But I remember putting my hand on his hand, and he pulled it away. I think he knew. He knew, and he had made preparations that week, but we didn't pick up on it at all. I did notice he seemed a tiny bit nervous, just in little ways. Like I remember something about the way he held his hand. And when I was sitting on the couch, he was right in front of me. I just had that thought, you seem just a tiny bit nervous. Yet all of his words were just spot on. Everything was fine. And it was a beautiful week, but he had cleaned out his room while he was home in secret. So it had been planned. And it's like he said that year before, or May, and then he died the next May on the anniversary of Amendment 1. I'll just never be accepted here, Mom. And I guess you just never know where you're safe in the world when you've experienced something like that. And if people of God, your safety, your safe place, can turn on you, what's safe? Where's a safe space? So, I forgot the question.
You had your hand up a minute ago, sorry.
I just have a thank you.
You're so welcome.
Thank you, Julie, for sharing the life of your son. Your book really made me become more aware of him through reading it. But I'd like to ask both of you a question, too. I want to know about how your husband, Bill, is doing. But one of the strongest lines in the book, I think, gives James a possible sermon title that may get him into trouble. And also, I'd like to know how you both feel. He says in the book, why have we let this son of a stay at our church? I wonder how you both feel talking about the youth director.
Honestly, that was part of the betrayal. That's the way it came out of Bill's mouth. But that's really the question I had too. And like with Pastor Parrish, there were so many meetings afterwards. And you know, there was this one where we all met at a neutral place, at my workplace. And Ben was not there because I didn't want to expose him anymore to the arguments. But it was decided, you know, the senior pastor said it shouldn't have ever happened, but he didn't ever say, I'm sorry to Ben or make a change. But he said, I feel like, you know, looking at the guy, I'm trying real hard not to say his name or the church name, but I said, well, I think you need to apologize if you truly feel like you misstepped. And he was like, he wasn't talking. The senior pastor was trying to pull him to make an apology, but he just really sat there in defiance. And then it was agreed that he would write Ben a letter. Well, a month went by, 6 weeks went by, nothing. So I asked, I said, what's going to happen? Where's this apology? And then finally a card was given to my friend Casey that just said, have a good summer. So he was that word, those words, and he shouldn't have been at our church. It was a safe place that was kind of polluted. But what could have been done differently would have been to name it honestly, to apologize, and to make a change to protect the children. Now we know there's risk. Now we know this person feels the way he does. What can we do to protect the others in the future? But he was allowed to stay. Bill wasn't able ever to go back to his administrator job. So it was trauma. And he is doing okay, but we are forever changed. But we are thriving to the best of our ability, and there is joy, and we love our dogs and our cats, and we have a good life, but it's a different life. He does work as watches the guard gate at Wake Forest on third shift a few nights a month. And he'll always make me dinner at least one night a week when I come home from work. And he's doing so much better. He's doing much, much better. And I'd say life's pretty good. But it's different. It really was like being picked up and put on a different path for each one of us. The girls are good. They're adulting really well. So I'm grateful for that. That could have gone so many ways. So I'm very grateful. But, Bill thinks, I will say, it's just really candid. He's always wanted to be more angry, more vocal, more like call the newspapers, call a lawyer, rah, rah, rah. And I always thought there would be resolution through peace. Didn't really happen. He might have been right. And I might have been the one who screwed up.
And to your question, two things. One is, if it happened in my building, there wouldn't have been a process, there wouldn't have been a staff parish meeting, that person would have been fired immediately. But more importantly, that person would never have been hired. We don't talk about this openly, but before I hired anybody, Hannah made it through, right? Ben. I just, in conversation, I try to test people and try to expose where they have judgment and anger toward whomever. And I want to know that. And if you've got a shred of that in you, you're not going to work here at this church. Even if staff parish said, we want to hire them, I say, I'm going to use my veto power. We're not going to do that here. Because the church is to be a safe place for everyone. It is not a place of judgment for anyone. These are just solid rules. This is church. This isn't James's thing, or this is Jesus's thing, and it's not optional. We are at noon, so let me call an end to this beautiful conversation. Julie, you're always amazing and wonderful. We love you dearly. And thank you. Do you autograph books?
Sure.
Ooh, all right. I've autographed some books, and they tell me that on the resale market, that increases their value by about 2 cents. But it can be a cool thing to have. Anyway, Julie, thank you. Join me in thanking.
Thank you. you. Thanks, James. I appreciate it.